The chamber is a cathedral of power dressed in marble and history, and yet, in this moment, it feels like the walls themselves are holding their breath. Heavy oak panels rise behind the elevated dais, darkened by decades of polished hands and heated debates. Above, a chandelier casts a muted glow, its crystals refracting tiny rainbows that dance faintly across the ceiling, little flecks of light in a room otherwise draped in a seriousness that could crush the unprepared. The hum of the overhead lights merges with the low whir of the cameras, a mechanical heartbeat marking the seconds before the blow is struck. Around the perimeter, aides shuffle in tight, quiet steps, their eyes scanning papers they've already memorized, each one pretending they are not watching. But everyone is. Front and center sits Ivanka Trump, poised like a marble statue, every strand of her blonde hair meticulously in place, her tailored cream blazer catching the chandeliers, light with each subtle movement. Her back is straight. No, straighter than straight. The posture of someone raised to understand that slouching is a form of surrender. Her fingers, tipped with a neutral polish, rest lightly on the edge of a stack of notes, but she doesn't glance down. She doesn't need to. This is not improvisation. This is theater. She inhales with the controlled elegance of someone who has done this before, not just here, but everywhere that mattered to her image. And when she leans toward the microphone, the slight shift sends a faint ripple through the watching crowd, as if even gravity wants to make way for her. Her voice, when it comes, is velvet over steel. Each word glides out measured, deliberate, yet edged in something meant to sting. She says, "Unfit," like a verdict, her lips barely parting over the consonants. Then reckless, a sharper sound, the double K biting the air before it can go stale, and then, with a pause perfectly timed for effect, dangerous. It is not the volume that cuts, it is the precision. Each label lands like a shard of glass tossed onto the table between her and Jasmine Crockett, invisible to the touch but sharp enough to draw blood. The microphones catch the faintest intake of breath somewhere in the gallery, but otherwise, there is no sound. It feels, absurdly, as though the room itself has just inhaled, not the people, the space. The red carpet underfoot, the flag behind the dais, even the tall, arched windows that filter in pale winter light all seem suspended, waiting for what will follow. The press gallery is a tight row of focused eyes, camera lenses slightly tilted forward, each operator sensing, without yet knowing why, that this moment might be the one their editors will freeze frame on tonight's broadcast. Somewhere to the left, a pencil taps once against a notepad, then stops, as though its owner realized the sound was a kind of blasphemy in the quiet. And yet, in the eye of this moment's storm, Jasmine Crockett does not move. She sits, her shoulders square, her hands resting lightly atop a folder whose edges are worn soft from days of handling. Her eyes, deep, dark, and unwavering, lock on Ivanka's with a steadiness that is not defiance for defiance's sake, but something quieter, stronger. A fire simmers there, not the chaotic kind that consumes, but the contained, disciplined heat of someone who has known since childhood that the world will test her, push her, underestimate her, and that the only way through is not to yield. The contrast is striking. Ivanka's composure is the kind built in boardrooms and gala dinners, where winning is a matter of appearances and whispers. Crockett's stillness is the kind forged in courtrooms and community halls, where winning means keeping the lights on for people who cannot afford to lose. Even in silence, the difference hums between them, like the low note of a cello beneath an orchestra's melody. Easily missed if you don't know how to listen, impossible to ignore once you do. Somewhere, a camera operator leans slightly, forward, zooming in on Crockett's face, the light catching the faint sheen along her cheekbones. Her breathing is slow, controlled. Her lips are pressed together not in tension, but in readiness. She lets the accusations hang in the air like smoke curling from a just-struck match, making no move to swat them away. In politics, silence can be surrender, but it can also be strategy. And Crockett's silence feels less like absence and more like the coiling of a spring. Ivanka's gaze lingers a heartbeat too long, perhaps expecting a stumble, a shake, some visible tremor in Crockett's armor. When it doesn't come, she leans back slightly, the faintest tightening at the corners of her mouth. A smile that isn't one. The air is dense now, heavy with expectation, and the journalists in the back feel it in their bones. The aides shift again, a subtle domino of movement along the wall. Outside these doors, the world moves on. Traffic lights blink, coffee cups grow cold, but inside, time seems to slow, thickening around this standoff. And then, without a word, Crockett moves. Her right hand, the one resting so still atop the folder, slides toward the small black device sitting quietly at the edge of the desk. It's unremarkable at first glance, no bigger than a phone with a single red light glowing faintly on its surface. But the way her fingers close around it is deliberate, careful. The gesture is unhurried, almost graceful, but there's a current underneath, like the slow pull of a tide before a storm wave breaks. She doesn't look down at her eyes stay on Ivanka, steady, unreadable. A breath catches somewhere in the gallery, audible this time and contagious. The sound spreads in micro-gestures. Someone's pen halts mid-sentence. A photographer's finger hovers just above the shutter button. Crockett's thumb rests over the device's single button, and in that fraction of a second before she presses the room somehow becomes even quieter. It is the stillness before the first note in a requiem, the moment between lightning and thunder, the heartbeat before the truth arrives. And then, click. Just moments earlier, the atmosphere had been electric, not the chaotic kind that burns too bright and fades, but the charged, deliberate hum of a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. It is the kind of electricity that moves through people's bodies before it announces itself in the sky, the kind that prickles the skin and sharpens the senses. Senators sit in their tall-backed chairs, their faces arranged into expressions of polite neutrality, though the flicker of an eyebrow or the tightening of a jaw betrays the calculations happening behind their eyes. These are people who have seen 1,000 hearings, 1,000 speeches, and yet even they lean forward ever so slightly, their posture revealing a truth they would never say aloud. This one feels different. The aides behind them shift in place, clutching binders and tablets like shields, their fingers tapping screens in frantic bursts as they send updates to unseen war rooms scattered across the city. Each tap, each swish of a page, is an echo of the larger game, one that stretches far beyond this room and deep into the veins of power that run under Washington like a hidden river. The press gallery is alive in its own way, a silent organism, with a dozen blinking eyes. Reporters sit shoulder to shoulder, pens poised, their notepads balanced on knees, but many are already typing, their eyes darting between the figures at the table and the glowing screens before them. Every gesture is weighed, every pause is catalogued. In this business, a half-second of hesitation can make headlines, and they know it. The camera operators, stationed like sentinels at the edges of the room, wear headphones and carry the physical burden of the moment in the steady hum of their equipment. One adjusts his focus, bringing Ivanka's face into a frame so tight that a single twitch of her lip will fill the shot. Another swings his lens toward Jasmine Crockett, searching for the micro-expression that might tell the world how this story will end before it's spoken aloud. This wasn't just another hearing. This was a collision of legacies and wills, the kind of moment history books don't always catch, but insiders remember for decades. Ivanka Trump did not enter this room unarmed. She came with words sharpened like surgical instruments, with the Calculated grace of someone who has spent her life weaving through the sharp edges of public scrutiny. Her presence here is not accidental. It is the culmination of a lineage built in marble lobbies and gilded boardrooms, a brand burnished over years of curated appearances and controlled narratives. The weight of her name precedes her like a herald, opening some doors without effort, sealing others shut without her lifting a finger. That name carries power, yes, but also expectation, an unspoken demand that she not only defend it but wield it, like a sword passed down from generations of fighters who never stepped onto a battlefield but still shaped the outcomes of wars. Crockett, seated across from her, carries no such inherited armor. What she bears is heavier. It is the collective weight of voices that rarely echo in rooms like this. The single mother whose rent has gone up for the third time this year. The veteran who stands in a food pantry line in the same jacket he wore in service. The teenager who works nights to help cover his family's medical bills. She is not just speaking for them, she is standing in for them. And in Washington, where appearances often drown out substance, that makes her dangerous in a way most of her opponents don't see coming until it's too late. She has no last name that opens gates, but she has a map of scars, political, personal, emotional, that tell her exactly where to strike when the fight comes. Every syllable Ivanka utters in these opening moments is crafted to pierce. There is no wasted breath. When she says unfit, the consonants land like a gavel. When she says reckless, it is with the same measured rhythm a surgeon might use when making an incision, knowing exactly how deep to cut without drawing too much blood at once. She does not raise her voice. She doesn't need to. The cadence of her speech, the slight lift at the end of certain sentences, is designed to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of those watching, to reframe the woman across from her as smaller, less capable, someone out of her depth. And yet, the stillness in Crockett's posture hints at something else entirely, something Ivanka, for all her preparation, might not have accounted for. There is no defensive shifting in her chair, no tapping of a pen to betray nerves. Her shoulders are squared, her chin level, her hands resting on a plain folder as if it contains nothing more than a shopping list. But her eyes are where the real story lives. They do not dart or narrow, they watch, they measure. It is the look of someone who has been underestimated so many times that she's learned to let her opponents dig their own graves while she quietly sharpens the spade. That stillness is not passivity. It is patience. Patience forged in community. Meetings where tempers flared and voices rose, but solutions were hammered out anyway. Patience born from years of fighting cases in courtrooms where every second of hesitation could mean the difference between justice served and justice denied. It is a trap, not in the cruel sense of the word, but in the strategic one, a snare built not from deceit, but from an unshakable confidence in the truth she carries. The aides along the walls can't see it yet. The senators in their chairs haven't recognized it. Even the reporters, trained to sniff out the blood in the water, are still waiting for the first visible blow. Outside this building, the city moves in its own rhythm. The rush of traffic along Constitution Avenue, the hiss of bus doors opening, the low murmur of tourists reading plaques in front of monuments. But in here, that world feels far away, as though the tall, wood-paneled walls themselves form a barrier between the ordinary and the extraordinary. This is the kind of space where reputations are made and unmade in an instant, where a single sentence, even a single pause, can ripple outward for months, years. Crockett knows this, Ivanka knows this, and so they circle each other without moving, without speaking beyond what's necessary, each waiting for the other to blink first. If there is tension here, it is not the brittle kind that shatters. It is the tensile strength of steel wire pulled taut, humming with potential energy. The question is not if it will snap, but when. And somewhere beneath the carefully arranged expressions, both women know that the answer will come not in the Words being spoken now, but in what is about to happen next. And then it happens. Not with a bang, not with a dramatic sweep of movement, but with something so small, so deceptively unassuming, that it almost slips past the senses before the brain registers the enormity of it. The faint, almost imperceptible click of a thumb pressing down on a playback button, followed by the brittle crackle of a recording coming to life. It slices through the thick air of the chamber like the first sharp note of a violin in an empty cathedral, not loud enough to startle, but so distinct that every head, consciously or unconsciously, turns toward its source. The room's collective breath seems to catch, that suspended moment where the human body instinctively leans toward sound before it fully understands what it's hearing. And then, layered over the static hiss, comes a voice, smooth, unmistakable, and carrying with it the scent of polished boardrooms, gilded corridors, and the quiet arrogance of someone who has been listened to their entire life. The tone is not hurried, not defensive. It is languid, self-assured, and, most damningly, utterly unguarded. This is Ivanka Trump, not at a podium, not framed by the controlled lighting of a press conference, but speaking in the raw, unfiltered comfort of someone who believes the world beyond the room she's in will never hear her words. She speaks of veterans, men and women who have bled for the flag, whose lives are threaded into the long, tangled fabric of American history. And she dismisses them with a single, contemptuous exhale as pawns, tools to be moved across, a board when the optics require it and swept aside when they do not. The casual cruelty in the delivery is worse than the words themselves. It is the sound of privilege so insulated it cannot even see its own reflection in the suffering of others. A ripple moves through the room, not physical, not visible to the untrained eye, but perceptible in the subtle recalibration of bodies and faces. On the far left, an aide who had been standing with a tablet tucked under his arm shifts his weight, the movement small but deliberate, as if steadying himself. To his right, a young reporter in a navy blazer leans forward, pen frozen. Above paper, her lips slightly parted in the kind of disbelief that borders on awe. She has just realized she is hearing the moment that will define her next front-page story. One senator's brow lowers by the slightest fraction, but in this arena, such a gesture is the equivalent of a shout. Across the aisle, a man in a tailored, gray suit tilts his head downward, eyes fixed on the papers in front of him, as if the lines of text might rearrange themselves into an escape from what is now unfolding. The recording continues, the seconds stretching impossibly long. Ivanka's voice takes on a different shade, the kind that plays at empathy but is hollow at its core, as she recounts a story, or perhaps a boast, about single mothers. She does not speak of them as human beings carrying the crushing weight of rent, groceries, and childcare. She speaks of them as abstractions, as convenient figures in a political calculus, their struggles reduced to lines in a ledger, and then she laughs. Not loudly, but in that quick, breathy way that people do when they've said something they think is clever, but know it will land only among those who share their worldview. The sound of that laugh is worse than any slur. It is the audible manifestation of a truth everyone suspects, but rarely hears spoken aloud, that in certain rooms, the suffering of the powerless is entertainment. The allies on her side of the chamber begin to radiate discomfort. One man taps a pen against his folder 3 times in rapid succession before setting it down entirely. Another crosses her legs, then uncrosses them, her heel bouncing with restless energy that betrays the mental scramble to form a damage control narrative before the recording ends. Even the seasoned political operatives in the back, the ones who can spin almost anything into plausible deniability, keep their eyes trained forward, refusing to look at each other, as though locking gazes would confirm the gravity of what they're hearing. The press cameras, merciless in their watchfulness, catch every flicker, the tightening of Ivanka's jaw in real time as she hears her own voice echo back at her, the faint narrowing of her eyes when she realizes, too late, which recording this is. And then the moment on the tape shifts again. Ivanka's voice, still casual, still laced with that almost bored certainty, recounts a memory of bending the rules, not for efficiency, not for innovation, but for the express purpose of, in her own words, keeping people in their place. The phrase lands in the room with the weight of a dropped anvil. It is not just the meaning, but the delivery. The way she says it with the same ease one might discuss seating arrangements at a gala or the choice of wine at a fundraiser. It is an unmasking, not through rage or blunder, but through the quiet confidence of someone who believes the mask is unnecessary among friends. By now, the room's frozen stillness is palpable. The air feels thicker, as though the words themselves have substance, coating every surface, seeping into the fabric of the chairs, the wood grain of the desks. You can almost hear the mental gears grinding, in the aides who are calculating whether to text their bosses, in the reporters deciding if they should start writing now or wait for the final blow, in the senators who are weighing the cost of aligning with or against the woman whose voice is now inescapably tied to these words. The only sound besides the recording is the faint hum of the overhead lights and the soft rustle of someone shifting a paper in a too quiet attempt to break the oppressive silence. It does not matter that the recording is not loud. Volume is irrelevant when content carries this much force. Each phrase lands like a drumbeat in a slow march toward inevitability, deliberate, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. And when the last sentence on the tape fades into static, it does not feel like an ending. It feels like the precise moment the earth tilts and everything that once felt stable begins to slide. This is no longer about rebuttal or debate. It is about the sudden, irrevocable exposure of a truth that was never meant to see daylight. In the space of less than a minute, the careful scaffolding of Ivanka's accusation has been stripped away, not just undermined, but obliterated. And in the echoing silence that follows, you can feel the balance of the room, and perhaps much more than this room, begin to shift. Ivanka's expression flickers. First confusion, then the faintest crack of panic before she gathers her mask again. But Crockett doesn't gloat, doesn't raise her voice, doesn't even look at her opponent. Instead, she speaks softly, almost sadly, about the cost of words spoken without thought, how they wound, how they linger, how they reveal the truth beneath the polish. Her voice carries the weight of church basements where hard decisions are made, of late nights spent, fighting for people who will never know her name, of the unshakable knowledge that power means nothing if it's wielded without conscience. And as she speaks, something shifts. The earlier smugness in the room gives way to a heavy, almost reverent quiet, the kind that falls when truth stands, uninvited, in the middle of the floor. When the recording stops, the silence feels endless. Crockett gathers her papers and leaves the device on the desk, its small red light still blinking. She doesn't need to stay. The message is already written in the stunned faces around her. Outside, the sky is overcast, the kind of pale gray that makes the Capitol dome look like marble carved from memory. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails, not urgent, just steady, like a reminder that the world goes on, even after the air has been changed in a single room. And for those who witnessed it, they will remember not the accusations, not the headlines, but the moment a calm voice, armed only with the truth, turned the tide in front of everyone.